So now that you're here, you might be wondering what lifestyle medicine is. Well, it is a well-researched, evidence-based approach to prevent, treat, and in many cases, even reverse lifestyle-related chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, and stress. Today, we will be talking about one of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, nutrition, and how it impacts our physical and emotional well-being, and tips on how to incorporate healthy eating into your busy lives. And we are delighted to bring you 2 guest experts, Dr. Gemma Newman and Dr. Laura Freeman, both of whom are members of British Society of Lifestyle Medicine.
So Dr. Laura Freeman is a GP and internationally certified lifestyle medicine physician. She ran her own family physician practice in Toronto before returning to Scotland to continue her medicine practice. She was also the Canadian Medical Council examiner for international medical graduates. She's currently on the advisory board for Plant-Based Health Professionals UK and is a course tutor for the UK's first ever online plant-based nutrition course at Winchester University and a practitioner for the Complete Health Improvement Programme. She has developed a strong interest in plant-based nutrition and optimising health through lifestyle choices. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Dr. Gemma Newman, aka Plant Power Doctor, is a GP, broadcaster, author, and writer. She is on the advisory board of the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK and contributed to the Winchester University Plant-Based Nutrition course. She has a specialist interest in holistic health, plant-based nutrition, and lifestyle medicine. In her practice, she has come to understand that body, mind, and soul are not separate, and that it is only in addressing the root causes of stress and disconnection that we can truly heal from inside and out. Her achievements go on, and I might be here for the whole hour if I read them all out. Her book, Plant Power Doctor, is coming out in January, so check it out and pre-order it. Welcome.
I've got 1 copy from the publisher.
Bravo. It looks wonderful.
Right, so to warm you up for today's session, Linda's going to take us through a simple stretch that you can incorporate into your daily routine, especially if you work at a desk.
So today we will stretch our quads and our bottoms. So every time you are sitting at your desk, you can always stand up just for a few minutes or even just for 60 seconds to get the blood flowing. Okay, so let's do that right now, ladies. Okay. Everybody ready? So a little bit of a jog, knees up, gentle, that's it. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woo! Yeah, shake it off, shake off your hands. Very good. If you have the chair just next to you, if you need it, do hold on to it and place both of your hands on your knees or just one of them and hold your chair not to fall. That's it. And pull your knee gently towards your chest. That's it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the other side. Gently hold your knee, pull it towards your chest, and at the same time, you can roll your ankle outside or in. That's it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. And now to stretch your quad, make sure that you're standing straight and hold the chair in front of you. And with the other hand, hold the foot and pull it close to your buttock as much as you can. Very nice and gentle. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And do the other side as well. That's it. Take a big breath through your nose and pull in your heel to your buttock. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. You can do this anytime to get your blood flowing, and you can do it every hour. There is no excuse, hey?
Right, okay. So we're here to talk about nutrition today. And we've got 2 specialists joining us to talk about nutrition. So before we launch into it, Laura, can you start us off by telling us what a whole foods plant-based diet is. Is it different to vegetarianism and veganism? And can people actually still have dairy products and meat products on a whole foods plant-based diet?
Yeah, so a whole food plant-based diet is a diet centered on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and really does focus on the whole foods, so reducing or eliminating any foods that have been processed. I have seen people describe it as a spectrum of diets, and so they can incorporate small amounts of dairy, fish, or meat. But when I refer to a whole food plant-based diet, it is a plant-based diet that doesn't include animal products. And that can be different from a vegetarian diet where people do incorporate milk and cheese, but can also be distinguished from a vegan diet, which can not involve any animal products, but can still have lots of processed foods like biscuits, chips, fries, that kind of thing.
I guess we often say that a vegan diet can be consistent of Oreos and Coca-Cola.
Right. Right. So I think whole food plant-based diet in my head is, one that focuses on those important foods that I mentioned, but also on minimally processed foods. It's a really healthy vegan diet, I suppose.
Thank you. Gemma, I know that you were skeptical about the whole food plant-based diet at the start. Can you tell us what changed your mind and how you got into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like most people, I'd been brought up on a traditional Western diet. And I think in the early years of my medical training, I found myself really quite sluggish and tired. I was doing a lot of night shifts, and my shift patterns were really quite challenging, but I was in my early 20s. So I thought, come on, I shouldn't be this tired. And that's when I started to realize that nutrition might be important, because I thought, well, if I'm going to get through an entire medical career, I better be falling asleep at the table, within the first 6 months of having graduated. So I understood that there was a link between what I was doing in my day-to-day life and my energy levels. And that's what kind of really got me started with lifestyle medicine all those years ago. And at the time, I was doing everything I could to just be a bit more healthy. I was having lots of fish and lean chicken and vegetables and salads and things that I thought would generally be quite healthy. And I was exercising a lot more. I decided to get into fitness. I was never into fitness at all. I would always try and avoid school sports, at every opportunity. So I thought, well, I've got to try and start moving my body now. And I was exercising, and I was doing really well, and I was really proud of myself. I managed to drop a few dress sizes and feel more energetic. And I thought that, as most people do, they become really attached to the thing that they're doing, the thing that worked for them. And that's how I felt at that time. But unfortunately, I did get my blood panel checked at that time when I was in my 20s, and I had a raised lipid profile, which is a way of measuring things like cholesterol and the proteins that attach to cholesterol in the blood. And I was quite disappointed, to say the least, because I'd put so much effort into being fit and healthy. And, my grandfather died of heart disease. He died suddenly of a heart attack in his 60s. And I didn't know it back then, but unfortunately, my father was also going to suffer the same fate. He died young of heart disease. He died suddenly at 59. And I thought that was just my genetic destiny. I just had to do all I could, but that was it. I would have to be sort of particularly careful after the menopause that I'd probably end up getting heart disease. But I kept on doing my research around, ways to help with lifestyle, not just for myself, but for my patients. So over time, I learned about things like psychological techniques and solution-focused therapies, cognitive behavioural therapy, movement, sleep, and all that stuff. But the real game changer was my husband, actually, because he began training for the London Marathon and was getting a lot of injuries. So he wanted to understand, what was it, apart from his running technique, which he'd already looked at, was there anything else that he could do to stop himself from getting injury after injury? So he began to emulate these big kind of ultra runners that he was reading about, people like Rich Roll, who wrote Finding Ultra, and Brendan Brazier, who wrote Thrive, Scott Jurek, Born to Run, all these incredible athletes, and they were all plant-based. And so he thought, I'm going to give this plant-based thing a go. And as you intimated, Linda, I wasn't keen to start with. I thought that he would get a nutrient deficiency. How would he have enough protein? You know, all the things that pop into your head if you're feeling skeptical and you don't really understand what's involved. But sure enough, he did brilliantly, and he managed to run without injuring himself. He managed to do a fantastic training regime. He actually completed the marathon an hour and 10 minutes faster than his previous attempt.
Wow.
Was absolutely mind-blowing. And then I felt a little bit silly. I thought, there's something in this and I don't know what this is all about, and I need to learn. And so that's when I began to delve into a bit more of the research online, and I began to understand the benefits of a plant-based approach for sporting endeavours, most specifically for recovery, and the antioxidants provided for recovery, but also the biggest diseases of the Western world. You know, we die of heart disease and cancer primarily, and if we can have a way of living that minimises these risks dramatically, then why don't more people know about it? And so that really fueled me on. And then I decided secretly to give it a go. I didn't want to lose face. You know, I didn't want to sort of give plant-based a go and fall flat. So I secretly tried it myself. And then I managed to get my blood lipids checked again. And I'm pleased to tell you that I managed to get them down into the normal range for the first time in over 10 years. 2 kids later, not exercising as much, certainly, maybe 3 times a week rather than every day. And a good 10 years older. So for me, that was a really personal indication of success. But not only that, I began to see real results for family, friends, and most importantly for my patients. People reversing their type 2 diabetes, people reversing their high blood pressure, one gentleman reversing his low-grade prostate cancer, IBS, Crohn's disease, diverticulitis, asthma even, eczema. I'm not trying to make out like it's the only panacea for health, but my goodness, it makes a tremendous difference for those who have never known about it or hadn't quite realised that it might be helpful. That's what we're all here for today, is really, you know, to spread that message so that they can at least understand what it involves and see if they want to give it a go.
Wow, that's so inspiring, especially, you know, when you were talking about your husband's success with being was it Ultraman runner and the London Marathon?
Yes. Well, I mean, I have to say he never actually ended up doing the ultra runs, but what he thought to himself was, if I can't even do the marathon, how do these guys do double that?
And how old was he when he went on a plant-based diet and he shaved off an hour and a half almost off of his time?
He would have been probably in his late 30s, maybe.
Incredible. So he achieved his peak just by changing his diet.
Yes. It was amazing, actually. It was very inspiring. But it is interesting how resistant I felt initially. I think that we have to acknowledge that there is an emotional resistance for a lot of people. If they haven't got an acute illness or something that they are fueling themselves, what their why is, like if they don't have a strong reason, then there's a lot of emotional sort of pushback, I think, to change in general, but actually specifically for food, because it has so many other connotations. It has, you know, memories attached to it, and identity is attached to food. Feeling as though you might be awkward, you know, amongst family or friends, be questioned. There are so many layers to it for a lot of people that I think that's important to acknowledge. And for me, I already could see a lot of the scientific benefits, and I'd seen it not only in the literature, but also obviously, as I say, for my husband. But it took that next emotional step for me to finally kind of sort of jump in and try it. And I never looked back. You know, I think once, I don't know about how other people feel about these things, but once I began to understand how easy it was, and once I had a few meals that I knew how to make, it actually, I felt like, oh gosh, why didn't I why did I have this block? Why didn't I do this before? So yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people perhaps might resonate with as well.
Maybe just taking one meal at a time is easier to look at it than to change your whole kitchen and how you eat, but maybe just to start with one meal at a time.
Yes, that's something that Susie Cameron talks about. Have you heard of Susie Cameron? She's the wife of James Cameron, who is the quite well-known director in Hollywood. They are both really passionate about plant-based eating, and she developed this campaign called the OMD campaign, which stands for one meal a day. Mm-hmm. And her idea is if you just try and go plant-based for one meal and see how that goes and work on that, and then it reaps a lot of benefits that people hadn't quite necessarily realized over time. Yeah.
Great. And Laura, what about you? How did you get into whole foods plant-based diet, and when did you start and why?
Yeah, so I have been on a plant-based diet for about 4.5 years now. Although before, much like Gemma, kind of grew up on a westernized diet, but also a diet that I consider to be healthy. So my mum is a retired home economics teacher, and so nutrition and good food has always played a big part in my life. But it was really only in 2016, so my second pregnancy, and my first ever appointment in my second pregnancy, my obstetrician at the time, who was extremely thorough and was examining my thyroid, found a lump in my neck. So I kind of left it through the pregnancy, and then my daughter had some health issues which kind of distracted me from my own health issues. But when she was about 6 months old, I had that lump in my neck biopsied, and it was I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. But at the time, much like Gemma, had my blood work done and was found to have really high cholesterol, which surprised me because I thought I was eating a healthy diet. I've never eaten very much red meat, but I did have a lot of dairy and chicken, lots of fish. So that kind of really shocked me that my cholesterol would be really high, especially because I was keen on exercising as well. And so I started to research what foods would raise your cholesterol, even though I had been through medical school and my GP training and my Canadian medical exams. So at that time I was qualified for 10 years. I had graduated 10 years and been at medical school for 5 years, and I found myself kind of Googling and looking up lots of things about nutrition when I probably should have known it already, but didn't. And I came across How Not to Die by Michael Greger and was completely shocked by what I was reading, feeling like I wish I had been taught that in my first year of medical school. And after I read that, I read more. I read The China Study by Colin Campbell. I watched a ton of documentaries on Netflix with my husband, because that was a way to get him involved as well. And we made the decision together to change our diet, and we did that really quickly, really overhauled things in a matter of weeks, really. And I felt the difference really quickly. I felt more energetic, I felt more clear-headed. I had 2 young kids, and I'd had my surgery for my thyroid cancer, but I felt a lot better. And I had my cholesterol repeated, and it had come down significantly. So I knew that what I was reading was also being reflected in real time in my own life, which was really quite incredible. But then the real power came when I started to discuss it with my patients, because I really felt like I was doing a disservice to them by not telling them the evidence-based medicine that I had found, and also that I was kind of had adapted that or adopted it into my own life, and it was what I was doing. And my patients were really curious. They had gotten to know me quite well, and I knew them really well, and it was something that I had discussed, usually whether they liked it or not, at their appointments. But really, I found that most patients really did want to hear about it, and they were really open to talking about diet and what I had discovered about, what kind of effects a whole food plant-based diet had on their diabetes or their blood pressure or their cholesterol or their mood. And much like Gemma suggested, the benefits are just extensive and the research is so compelling. So then it wasn't long before I started to see really incredible things, like people reversing their diabetes and their skin improving and their mood improving and being able to reduce or stop medications. So that was kind of the beginning of my journey, really. It's been about 4 years ago, and yeah, I haven't looked back either. I can't imagine ever eating any differently or practicing any differently either.
Amazing. And you said that you did it quite quickly. Within a matter of weeks, you've managed to change the diet for the family, was it?
So my husband and myself, yes, we did it really quickly, but we started saying that we were going to eat that way at home, but that if we were out with friends, we were in Toronto at the time, so I didn't have my family there, but if we were at friends, that we would not be awkward and have whatever they were having. But truthfully, we were really lucky because our friends were really good friends and really understanding and really open-minded, and actually they would eat plant-based meals whenever we would eat together, which was really what made it a lot easier for us. And now, actually, what's really incredible is that my mum and my dad and my sister and my brother-in-law, who's Australian and likes to barbecue everything in the true stereotypical way, they've also changed to a plant-based diet. And it's especially meaningful because my mum has had 2 separate cancer diagnoses, and my dad had a stroke a few years ago, and they have never had any healthcare professionals tell them to change or improve their diet or any lifestyle habits, actually. So it's quite reassuring for me to know that they have actually listened to me and taken on board the advice and started to figure things out for themselves. And so that's really amazing. So it's certainly easier now that I'm back in the UK and my family are all on board. It's been much more of a journey with my kids, who are 5 and 7. A bit more of a process. I've got a 5-year-old who will eat anything. Like, she's amazing. She'll eat beans and tofu and veggie curries, and she's incredible. But then my 7-year-old is very fussy and doesn't really like to try new things and doesn't really like new flavors, and that's been a bit trickier. And then things like play dates and birthday parties and school meals, like, we're still trying to navigate our way around that as best as we can. But they will call themselves vegan, and that idea of eating in a way that's compassionate and thinking about your health and thinking about, who we share our planet with, like, that's something at the age of 5 and 7 that they're aware of, which is really quite incredible, actually, because it took me a long time to get there.
I can actually second that, Laura. It's a similar story here. My family are all plant-based, and we would describe ourselves now as vegan. Vegan as a word is a strange one because people have emotional reactions to it sometimes.
Yeah, they do.
But with my son, my oldest son is similar to your oldest. He can be, sometimes quite a fussy eater, but for him, it was very much that he had an identity shift. He felt part of that transition and that conversation. So for him, it's more about compassion to animals than anything else, just because of, I think, his age, perhaps because he loves animals anyway. So for him, he actually was the one that instigated the avoidance of chicken a long time before I decided to go plant-based. He said, I don't want to eat chickens because I like chickens, and that was his logic, and he's very much like that. He's a literal thinker. So for him, it was quite straightforward. I like animals, I like chickens, therefore I don't want to eat chickens. Whereas the younger one is a lot more flexible. He'll eat what he's given a lot of the time. But for the older one, I think it helped that he felt part of that, and that was his reason why, more so than winning marathons or bringing in cholesterol down, which was different motivation for different people. For him,
exactly,
wanting to care for the planet and also wanting to help save animals. Bless him. So
yeah, which is just amazing that at that age they've made that connection, right? When I feel like for a lot of others it takes a really long time, or a lot of other people still aren't there yet. But truthfully, I find that really hard actually with kids, because they are, they do get really upset by it, and those conversations are really difficult, I find. But they are really important, and it does help them to think about their food choices in a way that they might not have before. Yeah, it's just can be a bit tricky, especially when they see their friends and people at school doing other things. Like, just navigating all of that can be hard, but definitely worthwhile.
So, Laura, you mentioned that neither of your family members were told about or advised on nutrition by their doctors. And as a physician myself, unfortunately, we see that a lot of doctors are not comfortable to give nutrition advice. And that raises the question to patients and to other colleagues. So is that because we don't have enough evidence for a plant-based diet, that we are not incorporating that into our daily life? Do we have enough evidence to back it up, to be able to advise our patients to do so?
Yes, it's a very simple answer. I think the evidence is there, it's compelling, there's enough of it. I think it's complex, and I think that plenty of people would argue that there's other high quality diets that can be beneficial for health, like the Mediterranean diet would be an example. But we've already touched on kind of compassion and animal welfare and planetary health, and if we're to tick all of those boxes, then we're talking about a whole food plant-based diet. And the evidence for that on all those counts is there. It's been there for a while. It's still coming out. And yeah, I feel very confident to discuss it with my patients and to try and help them navigate that, because it's not easy, and to find reputable sources of information and research so that then they can go and make their own decisions about what they want to do. But there's no doubt that the evidence is there. It's very strong. It's very compelling.
Absolutely, Laura. And I think the thing is, actually, it's almost, as you were saying, I think it was you that said it just now, you felt like you were doing a disservice to people, not letting them know, because, you have family members who could be suffering from severe angina, and then the week after, they could be able to walk to the shops. This is the difference it could potentially make in people's lives. And for anyone who's a medical professional and feels a bit uncertain about where to start, just know that you do have a body of guidelines that could support you in understanding a more whole food plant-based approach. I mentioned this briefly with the doctors before we started. We've got the One Blue Dot campaign by the British Dietetic Association, which is all about how to incorporate sustainable planetary diets into practice. We've got the Royal College of General Practitioners Green Impact Scheme, which tells GPs that if they can encourage their patients and staff to adopt a more plant-based diet, that is one of the criteria for helping them become a green certified practice. Over the pond, we've got the American College of Cardiologists says that a plant-based diet is the #1 preventative measure that you can take to help prevent your risk of heart disease. We've got the American College of Clinical Endocrinologists saying that a plant-based diet is one of the #1 things that you can do, a healthy plant-based diet, for the prevention of type 2 diabetes. We've got the World Cancer Research Fund that says you have to eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes if you want to reduce your risk of cancer. We have a huge amount of guidelines that have come about over the decades because of the research that is there. It's just not that well known about for some reason. I could go on all day about where you can find this kind of information, but Laura mentioned How Not to Die. I love that book as well. For me, it was like a medical awakening, if you like. I think Dr. Greger's work's fantastic. You don't want to just read one doctor's work and one doctor's research. It's important to look at the original research yourself. So I would really encourage you, if you're interested, to do that. And also, look at information from a number of different sources as well, so that you can, as long as they're reputable sources. So I really like learning from, there's a plant-based diets in medicine website, there's the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine website, but you've also just got generally even things like the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine or the American Society of Lifestyle Medicine, American College of Lifestyle Medicine. They've got loads of interesting data that you can look at, different studies to reference. And not to do a big book plug or anything, but I do have a book coming out which has a lot of references in it, and that in fact there are so many that I couldn't fit them all in, because it's supposed to be I think How Not to Die is quite bulky and there's a lot of references. It's more for people that are really wanting to dive into the data. But if you're somebody who's got a relative that has an illness, then my book's pretty good, because it's all colour. There's loads of pictures in it. There's loads of paintings of fruits and veg. But there's loads of references too at the back, and we couldn't fit them all in, so that the rest of them are going to be on my website. So what I'm saying is that there is so much data. It's just a matter of actually kind of bringing it all together and having the courage and the confidence to give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's probably worth mentioning. So Gemma and I are both associated with Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, and so our very lovely friend and colleague, Dr. Shireen Kassam, does a lot of hard work for us all, because every week she kind of sifts through that week's important reports and studies and press releases on various different things. And she has a newsletter every Sunday that she provides her own summary in an evidence-based way. And that's such a brilliant way of keeping up to date with all the nutritional research, because it is really hard to do. But it's also available in so many different formats, right? You can read blogs and you can read books, but there's also some amazing podcasts. So, I mean, there's so many, but Plant Proof is one that I really love. And so I think it's about finding the right kind of way that you enjoy to access that kind of information, because it's out there and it's available. It's just trying to find it.
And to inspire.
Just say, I can't believe I forgot to mention the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. What they've got as well, we've got information for patients and for health professionals as well on the website. So for anybody who wants to know more, there are talks on the website as well, different talks that are available, not just the Winchester University course, but other free talks that you can watch, download, patient information leaflets. There's loads of stuff on there as well. Yeah.
And the thing.
Sorry, Linda. I was just going to say it's really important because all the information there is evidence-based. So I think a lot of, I'm kind of generalizing here, but I think it's true, and Gemma correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people who have started on their whole food plant-based journey for health do discover things like animal welfare and issues around climate change along their journey. And so sometimes, when you're looking at evidence, there's questions of bias or unbias. And I think that, ethics aside, when you just stick to the evidence and present the research as it's reported, that's just something really important to be mindful when you're reading about nutritional research. And I think Plant-Based Healthcare Professionals does that really, really well. So it's worth saying that.
And to inspire our patients, what one patient success story would the two of you highlight that you have achieved?
Well, there's quite a lot in my book. Most chapters end with a success story. I think for most people let me just explain one, because the reason I'll explain her is because there are so many different things that she was suffering from. It's nice to see that they were all improved. So she was in her 60s, and she had primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is essentially an autoimmune liver disease. She had asthma, she had colitis, and she was pretty desperate. She couldn't leave the house, basically. She'd been reduced to being unable to leave the house because of her uncontrollable diarrhea. She was under a kidney specialist for chronic kidney disease as well. And she said, "I just want my life back," is what she said. And her life was dominated by hospital appointments. She was seeing the liver specialist, the kidney specialist. She was seeing the respiratory specialist for her asthma. She was seeing gastroenterologist for her colitis. And we talked, about what we could try and implement to see if it would help her. And she was very motivated, and it was a very short conversation, really. I just explained some of the things that we've talked about today. Simple things: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. Go slowly on the pulses, because I think a lot of people get quite bloaty or uncomfortable when they're suddenly going all out on the fibre and indigestible, sort of insoluble fibres and pulses. So I said, like, go slow. I suggested a few recipe books. I literally gave her a couple of recipe books, said, buy that book, give it a go and see how you feel. She came back basically like a new woman. She said that the main reason she did it was to help her gut function. But what she began to notice is that not only was she not rushing to the toilet all the time, but that her breathing was better and she needed less of her inhalers, and that she just felt like she had a lot more energy, and she was able to socialise more, which lifted her mood because she wasn't being dictated by hospital appointments and having to stay indoors. And so then it began a real kind of tidal wave of change for her. And when we spoke, I was really pleased for her. I said, oh, that's fantastic, let me check your kidney function. Oh, your kidney function's normal. She said, oh yes, the specialist was delighted, he couldn't believe it, he's discharged me from clinic, actually, I don't need to go anymore. And I said, oh, that's great. What about the gastroenterology? And I was looking at the letters from the gastroenterologist, and they said, we've discharged her from clinic, she's no longer got symptoms and her inflammatory markers have come down and she can basically come back if you think she needs to. And so yes, of course, she still had her autoimmune condition, but symptomatically, her day-to-day life was just, the difference was day and night. She actually came in wearing makeup, and she got herself this new jacket, and she looked 10 years younger to me, because she was beginning to live again, and that was hugely inspirational, because she was a lady who, she wasn't looking for a bikini body. She wasn't looking for the perfect nutrition plan. She just wanted to get her life back. And that's what she achieved.
And would you say that not only did it have an impact on her physical health, that it also had an impact on her emotional well-being and her mental health as well?
Yes, I do think that. And I've seen that for a lot of people. And it's hard to quantify because a lot of the people that I've noticed benefit from plant-based nutrition just generally seem to feel happier than they did. And I think we could look for, there is data. I've actually got a whole presentation on mental health and nutrition, which you can access if you want to know more about that. But there are some mechanisms that would go towards explaining why she felt better in herself, not least the short chain fatty acids that are in fiber rich foods, which help you to sort of settle the amount of dopamine and serotonin that is being produced and that your brain experiences. So I could go into a big spiel about that, but yes, I suppose is the short answer. It did help her mental health greatly, but also, just as I said before, allowing her to do the things that give her meaning. I think that's the thing, is she found a very strong why. And that's what propelled her forwards. So yeah, I think it definitely did help her mental health.
Incredible story. And Laura, did you have a success story you would like to share with us?
Yeah, so many. But there are some that stand out for me, and there are lots who have reduced their cholesterol and reverse their diabetes, and those have all been amazing. But the girl that I remember and I talk about most often actually is a young girl who I knew very well, and her sister was a patient of mine and her parents were patients of mine, and she'd had a really turbulent history in and out of hospital with bipolar disorder that had been really quite poorly controlled in her early 20s. And I hadn't seen her for a very long time, and it must have been about 5 or 6 years ago now. And she came to me saying that she really wanted to come off her medication, which was olanzapine, because she felt like she was gaining a lot of weight and she was feeling numb to everything, and she just wanted to come off it. And truthfully, I was really nervous at the time at even discussing that with her, but she had a lot of things going for her, like the right support, and she was really intelligent. She had been at that point really stable for a long time. And I discussed a whole food plant-based diet with her. She was eating a lot of red meat, a lot of dairy at the time, and so making changes towards that was really significant for her. But she had the support of her sister and her family, and she did really well with that, which was incredible. But the best thing about it is that it caused this kind of ripple effect for her through all the different pillars of lifestyle medicine. So once she improved her nutrition, she felt more energetic, and then she had more energy to exercise. And once she was exercising more, she was sleeping better. And when she was sleeping better, her mood improved. And when she did that, she really worked on things like confidence and social connections. She interviewed for a new job and got that, which was amazing because that was a big trigger factor for her. She started volunteering in her community to raise awareness for mental health, which was incredible because she was from Libya, I believe, and it had taken her a long time to talk to her family about her own diagnosis. In fact, one of the first times I saw her was during a psychotic episode, and her parents brought her in and they were completely unaware of her diagnosis. So for her to then be talking to other young people in her community about mental health was a really big thing. So for me, that case was a huge success story because it did tick all those lifestyle medicine pillars. And for her, it had just made such a significant difference in her life. And with her, it did really start with changes in her diet and really escalated from there. So I talk about her a lot. I don't think I'll ever forget her. And she was a real success story.
That's incredible. I just noticed in all of your stories, and as mine, I went plant-based for my colitis at the time and chest infections and impetigo. But I noticed in all of us that I noticed a huge energy boost as soon as I went on a plant-based diet. Within a month, that was a side plus on top of the resolution of my colitis and skin problems. But I see that you have also noticed that incredible energy boost that I kind of felt last time when I was in my early 20s. So that was pretty cool. What do you think? Why does this happen on a plant-based diet?
I think it's so true. I do see it most often. And we have all this evidence and we see all this information in people's biomarkers. Like when we get their blood tests, we see their sugars improving and their cholesterol improving. But there's no, or at least I don't measure energy levels. It's not something I've done. But it is definitely something that patients report. And it's one of the first things that they mention. They feel clear-headed, they feel energetic. And I think it's from a mixture of, all the good foods that they're including, all the less good foods, less healthy foods that they're excluding. And then that ripple effect of, when they're eating well, they're feeling like with that energy, they can do other things that are really important for their health, like exercising, like being more active, like thinking about their sleep more. I just think it has such a knock-on effect in all things. And I think that's something really important about this, is that we can't really ever focus on nutrition. This talk is about nutrition, this conversation is about nutrition, but it doesn't ever occur in isolation. It does overlap with so many other things that are important in our lives.
Yeah, it's so true. I think nutrition is one of the most powerful tools that you can start with, but you're not going to keep anything up long term unless it tastes great, or unless you've got another big motivation that is propelling you forwards. And we have so many different reasons why we eat, and I think joy and pleasure and abundance should all be part of that. And that's what a whole foods approach can offer. And as Laura said, building in other changes to make you feel great, like different mindset towards challenges, and different mindset towards how your body looks, and different mindset towards how you look after yourself, whether you get a good night's sleep. All of these things start to build and build until you've got a completely different person sitting in front of the mirror than you had before. Although I should say, some people sometimes don't get these immediate effects. I don't want people to feel like, oh, it hasn't worked for me, if in the first month they feel bloaty, or they feel like they've got a bit of brain fog, or they're feeling like, oh, I've had some sort of reaction. Very rarely that can happen too, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to suit you. I think it's a lot more to do with understanding your own individual gut microbiome and going slowly. Some people have got a lot of damage to their gut microbiome over the years from use of antibiotics, or from chronic stress, or from certain ways of eating that may have kind of diminished their gut bug populations. Long-term acne and chronic antibiotic use, chronic urine infections, also, any number of things could lead to some sort of imbalance, which might make that first month quite tricky for some people. So although most people I've spoken to, they can feel fantastic straight away, it's not always the case. And I'd say for those people, maybe just give it time and go slowly.
It's so true. And I think for most people, this is a diet that could suit most people in theory, but in the real world, in practical terms, like often a lot of people have some very real challenges and barriers along the way, and it's important to remember that. So although, and I saw in the chat, like I do think that we should focus on it being fun and make it as simple as possible. It can be tricky to navigate around the research and all the evidence and the confusion that's there. It can be difficult to know what to buy and what to make and what to cook and how to store food. And then it can be really complicated to have these conversations with your family or friends. And I think it's important not to dismiss that, because if we just ignore it, then people can feel like they want to give up. So it's really helpful to think about all these things beforehand and to prepare for them, so that really set yourself up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is so much to talk about on nutrition. I think, Gemma touched on the microbiome, and that's a whole other topic, and there's so much to talk about on that. And so I'm just conscious of time, and we do have 2 months dedicated to talking about gut health and nutrition in more detail next summer, in July and August. So I hope you can join us then again. And this really is just a whistle-stop tour, and hopefully it has been really thought-provoking.
It's a taster of what you might want to enjoy a bit more of. And from Laura as well, please do watch out, because she is putting together an incredible online resource for people. So watch this space, because there's going to be loads more that she's going to be able to provide for patients and for people who are healthcare professionals as well. So yeah, there was such little time, but at least we've given you a little taster of what to expect.
Yeah, and both of you have mentioned quite a few resources. If you could send them to us, we can collate them and send them out to people who might be interested in getting them. Would that be all right?
Yeah, sure. I could put a link from my book here as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so before we'll conclude with a breathing exercise, and before we go on to that, does anyone have any questions for Gemma and Laura? You can put your hands up and wave at us, or just put it in the chat.
There was somebody asking about the EPIC Oxford study, that there has been so much going on around the EPIC Oxford study. Would any of you would like to comment on that?
Sure. I mean, Laura, did you want to say something and I can add in after?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, I'm losing track of time and days now. It was either this week or last, EPIC Oxford study, which highlighted that vegans had higher risk of fractures, but And it was a really complex study, but it was also a really high quality study, and two of the authors were vegan. So when we're talking about bias before, I think it's important just to make note of that. But there were also some challenges too in the research, and but ultimately it suggested that it really helps us to focus on that if we are eating whole food plant-based diet, it should be carefully planned out. And we do need to think about supplementing with B12, vitamin D3, being really mindful of our calcium intake. And one thing that they mentioned was BMI. So if your BMI was under 22, then you had a higher risk factor, but above that, the risk factor seemed to stay the same, if I'm correct about that, or was comparable. And so there's lots of complicated factors there. It's not just a blanket statement that vegans have higher risk factors. Like, it's more about are they meeting their nutritional requirements? Are they thinking about other things that are important for bone health? So exercise, smoking, vitamin D3, excess caffeine, BMI, and all those things are important. But it was a really good study, and I think it's important to know about it and to understand it, and for it to prompt us to just be really mindful about meeting all our nutritional requirements.
Yeah, I think what Laura said is good. The EPIC Oxford study is one of the longest running studies on different sort of dietary groups over a long period of time. It was done on dietary questionnaires, so they asked people questions about what they ate. I think it started in 1993, and they asked a few times, like maybe 2000, around about the year 2000, and again in 2010. They haven't asked in the last 10 years, but I think it was one of the studies that shows that vegans had a lower risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancers, cataracts, diverticular disease, kidney stones. So, I mean, that was the upside of the research. But also, as Laura mentioned, if the BMI played a huge factor, and they did try to correct for BMI, but the problem was they couldn't correct completely because BMI, the relationship between BMI and fracture risk isn't linear. And actually, if you look at the raw data, what you find is that if they had a BMI of 22.5 or more, there was actually a lower risk of hip fracture than the omnivorous population. But that wasn't one of the headlines of the study, interestingly. So just to put that in perspective, if you lump all of the BMIs together, trying to correct for the BMI, they found that I think there were 20 more cases of any kind of fracture per 1,000 people over 10 years. So that's the numbers, and they were trying to figure out, well, why would that be? And I think one of the main things that we could say, as Laura mentioned, the study doesn't tell you what they were supplementing. In fact, they know that most or at least half of the vegans didn't supplement anything in their diet, as far as I can remember. And that's
because I think because it was from the 90s, there was less access probably to fortified foods like plant milks, for example, that are fortified now. And so there is some difference there, and it's probably worth noting, it was however many years ago now, that actually it's much easier, I think, I would say anyway, to meet calcium requirements now with those types of fortified foods.
Yeah, and also they weren't taking vitamin D at all either. Most people, I would say now, understand the importance of that, whatever they're eating, just because of the latitude that we're at as well. We're not going to be able to make as much vitamin D for important, which is important for bone health. But yeah, so we don't know their vitamin D status. We don't know how active they were. There's a lot of things that we don't know. But as I said, I think BMI is pretty crucial, and so that's an interesting thing to sort of pay attention to as well, as Laura said. So ensuring that we have lots of yummy calcium-rich foods, having our vitamin D3, and staying active, moving our bodies, and I think if you look at all of those things combined, I don't think we need to worry too much.
Excellent, thank you, Sophie. Do you have any other questions coming in?
just having a little look now, but actually I have a question myself actually for Dr. Gemma. Obviously I imagine a lot of this will be in your fabulous book that's coming out in January, but could you for example, the people that are listening today, give us some bite-sized tips on, if you're thinking about going plant-based, how you can make some small changes, practical changes into including a more plant-based diet into your...
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there are loads of tips in the book, but I think probably as a headline, it's about, number one would be finding your why. So you have to figure out, why is it that you want to start making some changes? Is there something specific that you have in mind? Are you hoping to get more energy? Are you hoping to be able to walk your daughter down the aisle for her wedding? Are you hoping to be able to live to see your grandchildren, doing sort of growing up? Like, is there anything specific that you are dealing with that you think this is going to help me? Or if your motivation is for animal compassion or for our planetary health, focusing on that will be a really great start, because I think any kind of change or shift in what we do has to come from a place of really wanting to make that choice, and then making it easy for yourself, making it enjoyable. So simple swaps is a great thing. So find your favorite meals and then make a simple way of adding in more veggies, adding in more pulses. Some people like to go really slow, so they'll have a mixture of a meat mince and maybe a soya-based mince, and then they'll gradually work their way towards like a lentil bolognese or something. Other people prefer to go more quickly and then just make a delicious dish that they found online, make it an adventure and take it from there. I think it's important not to get too bogged down in feeling stress over it. I think finding joy and abundance in it is key. Making it an exploration of different tastes and flavors and textures, and getting your loved ones involved if you can, that really helps. But not everybody can do that, and that's okay, but it certainly can make it easier. Even something simple like starting with milk. Like if you normally have cow's milk, find a really great plant milk substitute that you like. And it might be a different substitute for a different thing. Like some people will love oat milk in coffee, some people love soy milk in cereal, some people, they love the taste of a pea milk or whatever it might be. But that might be a nice thing to just kind of get you started. And then pretty soon, you've got a palette of a few different meals up your sleeves, and that you've changed the way that your taste buds are working, and you start to feel more energetic. And then the changes kind of just keep going from there, don't they? I think once you've sort of made a little bit of a start on it, but don't aim for perfection unless that's your bag. Unless you find it really easy to just go all in and jump in and be perfect with things. Most people aren't like that. They make progress more gradually. And that's great. Just celebrate the progress and feel good. Just feel good about the changes that you're making and all of those different steps that you've taken. So yeah, so that would be my top advice.
Amazing.
Sorry. So just a question to Laura. There was a question about osteoarthritis and dairy consumption. Do you believe that patients with osteoarthritis would greatly benefit from cutting out their dairy from the inflammation point of view?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I just recently listened to Michael Clapper talk about this, and he explains it really well, because dairy can be thought to be inflammatory, and osteoarthritis has an inflammatory component to it. So it can be, there can be a link for sure. And I think that ultimately, even if there is a question mark over the link, or the evidence is not as black and white as it is for things like heart disease and type 2 diabetes, it certainly can't do any harm, and if anything, only benefit for other health conditions. So it can be something that's really good to experiment with, and I would encourage everybody just to try that.
Interesting. Any other questions, Sophie, on the list?
There's a question here about keeping up iron levels for young women on a plant-based diet.
So just think BLT, and don't think bacon, lettuce, tomato. Think beans, lentils, and tofu.
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, there's
Sorry, you go for it, Laura.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's really no difference in terms of iron deficiency between vegetarians, vegans, and omnivores. Like, it's really not more common in people who are vegan, but like any diet, it's got to be well considered. Make sure you're including all those BLT foods that Gemma suggested, and doing things like combining them with vitamin C to increase their absorption is a wee trick for making sure you're increasing your iron levels. So it's definitely, I don't think it's difficult, but if you are reducing foods that from your diet that might have been higher in iron before, then it can be worth just thinking about what foods are going to be important for you to include in a plant-based diet as you transition.
Yeah, and I think also tannins in tea can sometimes interfere with iron absorption. So have tea with the docs, but don't have it with your meal. So have it in between your meals. And I think, just a word about iron. Heme iron from animal sources is more readily absorbable, and that's why this sometimes comes up for people. But that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because heme iron, not only is it more bioavailable, but your body can't really control the absorption of iron from heme sources, which means that sometimes, in some cases, you can actually become iron overloaded. And also heme iron oxidizes more easily in the body. So if you can imagine the brown on your apple or the rust of a car, that's oxidization. And that's what's happening inside your body if you've got excess ferritin, excess heme iron, which can increase risk of oxidative stress, and also has been associated with increased cancer risk. So, we have to sort of look at the pros and cons of where we're getting our iron from. Plant-based sources of iron, your body can control how much it takes in of non-heme iron. So as long as you're getting enough, you're never going to get too much.
And the classic question about protein, how do you get enough protein on a plant-based diet?
There is a word for protein deficiency, and I always trip over it, kwashiorkor. There's a very unusual disease resulting purely from protein deficiency, and if you've never heard of it, then that's probably because you are never likely to get a protein deficiency whatever you're eating. If you're having enough calories, then you're going to be getting enough protein regardless of what you're eating. Having said that, if you're a bodybuilder, you might want to be, more mindful of your protein-rich food sources, of course. I think we need about 0.75 milligrams per kilogram of protein, which most people don't work that out. I've never worked that out for myself because I'm not somebody who's an athlete or into muscle sort of building. But essentially, as long as you're eating a varied whole foods diet with lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and pulses and nuts and seeds, trust me, you're going to be getting plenty of protein.
Laura, anything to add to that?
Agreed. I just I just think protein is so overemphasized, and actually we need a lot less than we kind of are made out to. And when you look at what your requirements actually are, it's really easy to get them on a diverse plant-based diet. So even things like broccoli and brown rice contain protein, they just contain it in smaller amounts. But when you start incorporating things like tofu and beans, lentils into your diet, like it really isn't difficult to meet your daily requirements. And again, then if you're thinking about looking at research and studies, there's enough to suggest that plant proteins are superior to animal proteins. And they come in a package with other helpful things like fiber, which we've not touched on, but could probably spend another hour talking about, and antioxidants and polyphenols and all those other good things.
Exactly. You've got to look at the protein package. Are you taking your protein alongside antioxidants, polyphenols, micronutrients, or are you taking them alongside heme iron and new 5GC and
saturated fat? Yeah.
Polyaromatic compounds that are cancer causing. So, I mean, not to say, I'm not trying to demonize any kind of food product as such, but I'm just saying the protein package is quite important. If you're over the age of 65, then it's really important to think about weight bearing and resistance exercise, as well as making sure that you perhaps focus more on protein in your diet, just because you want to reduce any muscle mass wastage that you would get as a result of an aging body. But as Laura quite rightly pointed out, plant proteins actually have been associated with a higher longevity or a lower mortality rate for all causes of death in population-based studies. So there's good reason to incorporate more plant proteins in your plate.
And Laura, you just mentioned about fiber. I do want to touch on it just for a minute because it's really crucial. With my patients, I try to, whenever they ask about protein, I try to ask them to start focusing on the fiber and learning more about fiber and getting familiar with the nutrition effects and how much fiber they have in it. As we now know that the Western diet on heavy animal-based diet that we are all on here in the US and the UK mostly are really low on fiber. And it's about 10 to 15 grams of fiber that we have in a day, when the minimum recommended should be around 30 to 40 grams. But the more you can achieve, the better. What do you tell your patients about fiber?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gemma just said she has to go, so it's just saying goodbye. I point out the importance of fiber, and also that, you know, while so many people concentrate on protein, it's really useful to see how deficient people are in fiber and to think about the benefits that it brings in terms of it can help our digestive processes. So increased fiber, you're less likely to be constipated, have hemorrhoids, have conditions like diverticulosis. It's really important for reducing a risk of heart disease, for reducing cancer risk, for reducing type 2 diabetes, for helping to maintain a healthy weight. I mean, the benefits are so extensive and really not discussed often enough. And plant foods are naturally high in fiber, whereas animal foods have zero fiber. And I don't think people realize that at all. So when you start to increase your plant foods, you are automatically increasing your fiber intake. And you're doing that with other beneficial health foods too, right? So thinking about antioxidants and polyphenols and lots of good fats. So I think it's a really important thing to talk about with our patients, and to kind of highlight the importance of fiber and its many benefits, many health benefits.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm going to have to go too in a minute, so thank you for having me, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. And we would really appreciate some feedback from you to make sure that we continue to serve you on this platform the best we can. And if you would like to leave the meeting now, then it's been great having you on, and we hope to see you again next week. But if you'd like to stay back and chat with us for the next 10-15 minutes, we'll be here. Go make yourself a cup of tea and come back. Just leave the Zoom on, and we'll stay for another 20 minutes or so.